My dear friends, actually, there is not an idea on how to make the government work which has not been given. So much so that if you read the report of the Second Administrative Reforms Commission, which was headed by Veerappa Moily, not just points, not just paragraphs, but whole pages after pages have been lifted from the report of this that Venkat Chelaya Commission on the working of the Indian Constitution. So the one breakthrough idea, Dheeraj, on how to make the government work is, please implement any idea of any commission. I think the second point to remember is that our society is much healthier, it is resilient, it is much more creative than the apparatus of the state. And this is going to remain this way. Therefore, a lean state is what will work in India. And this is the process which was set in motion by the reforms from the early 1990s. And this is the process which unfortunately has been reversed in the last 10 years. So we have to reverse it and get back into the direction in which the role of the state in our lives will continue to be diminished. Third, do not be seduced by a new law, do not be seduced by a new institution. You see, this poor girl is raped and killed. What is the response? A tougher new law, rape law. But actually speaking, the real tribute would be to enforce the existing laws. And that if there are 20,000 or 30,000 rape cases which have not been solved or which are still pending in the courts, you finish them in 3 months. If Madoff can be convicted in 3 months, Raja Ratnam can be convicted in 3 months, Rajat Gupta can be convicted in 3 months, why not a rape case? But our thing always is a new, tougher law when we do not enforce the existing law. So look for loopholes in existing laws by which they are not enforced. You know, sir, in the Representation of People's Act, there is a section 8 that that a legislator convicted of a heinous crime, that a legislator convicted of a heinous crime like murder shall lose his seat in the legislature forthwith. Then how is it that people who have been convicted of murder continue to be in legislatures? Because after that section, there is a subsection saying, anyone convicted of a heinous crime shall lose his seat in the legislature forthwith, unless he files an appeal within 3 months. So which ass, having been convicted of murder, shall not file an appeal within 3 months? Arun and I know Justice Sareen very well. Now, if you read he's the Lok Ayukt of Delhi. If you read his annual reports, his lament, you see, corporations of Delhi government have been put under his purview. So some IAS officer who's heading the corporation, he arraigns him and finds that, yes, prosecution should be launched against him. No. But IAS officers, to prosecute them, you must go to the Home Ministry. So again, it's just a simple loophole. So in each of these cases, instead of going for new laws, we should look at existing laws, plug the loopholes, and seek their enforcement. The same thing for new institutions. That is why I was never enamored of this demand for the Lokpal. Another institution. See, there's a problem. We ignore the problem. It explodes. We say, kya karna chahiye? Yaar, ek institution banao. We don't have advanced studies. Kya karna chahiye? Institute for Advanced Studies bana do Simla mein. 10 years later, the problem is still there and the institution has become a new problem. So instead of that, you want to check corruption? The easier way is just 4 simple changes. No adjournments. Second, the onus of proof should be shifted on the public official who has disproportionate assets. My predecessor in the communications ministry, one of my predecessors, Mr. Sukhram, उनके पलंग के नीचे 4.5 करोड़ रुपया मिलता है। Now CBI must prove. The CBI must prove that it is beyond reasonable doubt that he got this as a bribe. It should be the reverse. The preponderance of probability is that howsoever frugal Mrs. Sukhram may have been, they could not have saved 4.5 crores in cash from a minister's salary. Third simple change is confiscation of all assets of the person, not just those which have been got from the bribe. And fourth is you have punishment which is exemplary, which entails imprisonment, physical imprisonment for the person, and that he is barred from public life for life. You don't require Lokpal. So not a new institution, not a new law, but existing institutions and existing laws. Fourth, rules. No institution can run without rules. But हमारे यहाँ attitude ये है that a person's status is known by the number of rules he can disregard. And in parliament, the attitude is, उनको कहो कि नहीं, under what rule are you speaking? He said, what do you mean, what rule? He said, well, this is the rule book, man. Under which rule are you speaking? He says, the rule book लाइए इधर है हम ही ने बनाई है ना, हम अभी change करते. That the people of India are supreme, we represent the people of India, therefore we are supreme, therefore we can do anything we like. But you know, it's this sturdy banks enable the river to flow fast. So also we must ensure that you have institutions and rules are enforced, rules which are necessary for the proper functioning of those institutions. And the media and others can play a great part in this, because actually we encourage the violation of rules. अगर कोई हल्ला करता है, पार्लियामेंट डिसरप्ट होता है, हेडलाइन, ब्रेकिंग न्यूज. अगर कोई बहुत रीजन्ड एक्सपोजिशन देता है ऑन द डिफेंस बजट, नथिंग. So Mrs. Thatcher used to say about the terrorists that publicity is their oxygen. Don't give them publicity. Publicity is the oxygen for terrorists. It's also the oxygen for politicians. When they violate the rules, just black them out. So enforcement of rules is very important. And I believe that the time has come for this. You know, there's a sequence, Arun will remember, in the 1960s and 70s. Every strike was a struggle, in quotes. Every trade union leader was by ex officio a paragon of virtue. But then, with an integrating society, fewer and fewer people, their strikes would inconvenience larger and larger numbers of people. So strikes went out of favor with the people. Trade union leaders came to be looked upon, nahi, datta samant hai. And militant trade unionism finished in India. I believe that the same thing is happening, that people are getting fed up of persons who disrupt parliament or who prostitute courts. Therefore, a great moment has come in India for us to stand by institutions and stand by the rules which are necessary for them, for their proper functioning. Fifth, scrutiny. You know, if you look at American judgments of the Supreme Court, they are analyzed in such detail. Mr. A very distinguished ambassador is here. He would remind us that if you have an American judge is nominated for the Supreme Court, how closely his record has been monitored for 25, 30 years. Every single judgment that he has given, Mr. Bajpayee will remind us, has been analyzed by some professionals. Here, you show me the analysis of Indian Supreme Court judgments. That is why they can get away with anything. And they do get away with anything. There's a judgment of the Supreme Court on this education and reservations in private sector educational institutions. Case goes to a 3-judge bench. They hear it. Then they think any constitutional matter should go to 5-judge bench. So that hearing goes on and on and on. The 5-judge bench gives a judgment of 1,400 pages. Nobody can understand it. So a 7-judge bench is constituted to distill what the 5-judge bench has said. But then, that 7-judge bench, nobody can understand. So a 3-judge bench is then constituted to distill the points of law of the 7-judge bench, which distilled what the 5-judge bench said after the 3-judge bench had referred the matter to it. So because we don't scrutinize, they can go on doing whatever they do. And scrutiny must also mean that we praise those who do good work. I'll give an example from India Today. Because of the sterling work that India Today has done on the ranking of states, every chief minister today is trying to project himself as a person who's doing well in governance on those criteria which you have picked up for ranking of states. So scrutiny must mean both things. It must mean exposure of those who are doing wrong, and secondly, of promoting, projecting, and of being fortresses around those who are doing good. 6th point, partnership. Today in India, everything is adversarial. CAG versus government, government versus judiciary, center versus states, opposition versus government. But this is not how it should be. I believe that in 4 areas, definitely there should be partnership. First, center and states. I would think that a prime minister in India should disregard the opposition in Delhi and make the state chief ministers the partners in governing India. Why do they have to come here as supplicants? Why does the NDC only meet here and they come with petitions? You hold the NDC anywhere in the state capitals. And secondly, I think there should be a partnership of government and judiciary, and here the media as well as industry can play a part. Like all journalists, most judges, none of them would have been in a factory. They would not have been on a work site, but their pronouncements affect those. So why not engage them in a dialogue? That these are the conditions. This is what investment entails. This is what your delay in going in your hearings and adjournments has the consequences on the ground. So that dialogue should be done. Third, I think there is a critical problem today which is not well enough recognized, and that is between defense and the civilian establishment. The defense forces, I have never seen them, I have known them well personally as part of my work for 30 years. I have never seen them that much suppressed anger and resentment as you find today. I don't mean partnership just in a weapon system, choosing a weapon system, but partnership in the strategic posture of India, in the strategic outlook of India. They don't feel that they are parts on determining these things. Next, and finally, that is private-public partnership, not just in individual projects, but in policy formulation, in formulation of our stance on climate change, on WTO, and so on. That is very necessary. In telecom, the whole relationship has again become adversarial. If I may just recall an incident, when I was given a charge to clean up this particular sector, I found all the operators had cases against the government, all the operators had cases against each other. And when I called when I requested all of them to come for a meeting, and said, let's jointly, you set up a group among yourselves to propose solutions to government. I will be your champion within government. Many journalists who were covering telecom at that time said, oh, how is this possible? They are fighting each other, this, that, and the other. But they came up with solutions within 2 weeks. The same persons, Mukesh Ambani, our Sunil Mittal, they were all in different places, fighting each other in courts. Everybody withdrew all cases against each other and against the government. And the result was that a transparent policy was instituted. And that has many benefits. In this hall, I am unique. Because in this hall, there is nobody else who has a certificate of honesty from the CBI as I have. Because everybody worked in the open, and they worked as partners. That they please compete, not in suborning a minister or suborning a civil servant, compete in the market. And that's what they did. That is how the telecom sector grew. So partnership would be this. But the fundamental point is individuals matter. It's a point that Narendra Modi had made. It's an apparent point. The same constitutional system, one prime minister is able to deliver, the other person is not able to deliver. One chief minister is able to take his state up, the others preside over it, stagnation for 13 years. Individuals matter, and this is the central failing which we must address in the Indian constitutional system. This filtering mechanism is not placing power in the hands of persons who have competence, integrity, and dedication to the country's interests. And the root of the problem is the legislator, because it is from the legislature that the Council of Ministers is selected. And it is from that Council of Ministers appoints judges, it appoints vice-chancellors, it sets the ethos of the police, it sets the ethos of the civil service. So qualifications for legislators is the one, if somebody asked me for one reform, it would be this that I would urge. Eighth, we must formalize what has happened in practice. We have transited to a quasi-presidential system. We should formalize this matter. Because you see, in the state governments, does the assembly matter? No. In fact, other ministers also don't matter. The chief minister matters. And here, the parliamentarians are ensuring that the parliament becomes less and less relevant. Therefore, I feel this is a welcome move. This is the Indian way to reform in the political system, and we should formalize this. The first way would be curtail the sessions of parliament. And media should not be upset that this time, out of the 60 days, there were only 4 days work was done. Actually, we should say that the next session, the number of days to be allotted shall be determined by the moving average of the last 3 effective days of the last 3 sessions. Second, I feel that the ambit of parliamentary discussion must be reduced. It must be confined to legislative proposals and to the great macro policies. Headlines today should not be discussed, which is all they do. Third, I think it is time for us to argue that a proportion of the cabinet at least should be from outside the legislature, but that would take me out of this. But that is the point that I wanted to make, that we should now formalize this transition to a system which is already quasi-presidential. Most important, and I will end with this particular point, sir, is each of us must recognize our role in bringing, our contribution to bringing things to this pass. No bribe has been received before it has been given. No judge can be bribed without the intermediation of these advocates and solicitors. No minister can make money without the paperwork being done by civil servants. They are to be civil servants of society. They become very civil servants. So, could Satyam have happened without chartered accountants? How is it that the biggest criminals get the biggest lawyers in India? So, their evil is done with our hands. We must recognize that. And therefore, the first step to reforming things is that we must desist from evil ourselves. So that when Gandhiji says, be the change that you want to see in the world, that is not a cliche. Actually, most cliches are very true. So like all cliches, it is a fundamental truth. And that doesn't mean just do something once. It means, I had an occasion to quote this sentence earlier in one of India Today's conclaves. One of my favorite sentences from the Dhampad. It says, as the silversmith removes impurities from silver, so the wise man from himself. In our case, so the wise man, so the concerned citizen from institutions. As the silversmith removes impurities from silver, so the wise man from himself, one by one, little by little, again and again. That is how we should take up one institution, each of us, one issue. And on that, we should work for 5 years, and you will see the great difference. One ministry, one municipality, and we make it accountable and make it work, it will really make a difference to the functioning of government in India. Yes, there will be costs, but cost does not mean going and standing with a candle. A commitment does not mean going and standing with a candle once. It doesn't mean shouting a slogan. It means that we are willing to cheerfully bear the consequences of doing what is right. Therefore, I'll conclude in a word, to make the government work, institutions, for that conduct, for that character, and character means to willingly undergo the costs of doing the right thing. Thank you.
Let's take the BJP. Over the last 9 years, it has spent its time in opposition.
Please take the BJP.
It has spent the last 9 years ensuring the government doesn't work in one way or the other, opposing things like FDI in retail or even other FDI policies which it would normally stand in favor of. So should it come into government, how do we expect it to make government work?
Sir, of course, I can only speak for myself. So there is a great altruism in Indian politics. Each party works for the other party. BJP works for the Congress. Congress government is working solely for the BJP. Nobody is making the case for Narendra Modi as much, I don't want to say as the present Prime Minister, but as the present government. Coming a strong leader now. So also in the case of the BJP. You see, this is actually a very important point that you have said. This adversarial politics has gone to such a foolish extent that whatever you do, Dheeraj, I will shout against it. When you are in office, when I come, you will shout against it. I'll give you an instance. This happened. Mr. Pranab Mukherjee is going to come just now. I tell you. There was Mr. Yashwant Sinha had presented a budget. Then, in October, there was a discussion on the economic some situation. And Mr. Pranab Mukherjee had spoken on behalf of the Congress. He said, this government does not know what it wants. It does not have clarity of thought. It does not know what it wants to do. It has said, see, in February, the finance minister announced that they will bring proposals for a new reformed labor law. We are in October, and no reform proposals have come on labor law. Because there is no clarity of thought. So I was to answer on behalf of government, and I said, sir, I don't know about the government. Maybe they don't have clarity of thought, but I have complete clarity of thought. I have studied the labor law. So I will now read out to you a few clauses and tell you in 2 sentences each why that should be changed and the new draft. I have the draft also of the new section. So if you permit, I will now do. So section 5C, it today says this. For this reason, it should say this. If you approve by voice just now, I will go to the Prime Minister in the evening with folded hands. Sir, this is what the Rajya Sabha wants. Please let us introduce this. So I read 5C. Then for this reason, it should be this. Everybody started shouting, no, strike breaker, this, that, and the other. I said, okay, not 5C. Now, section 7. So I read out section 7, why it should be changed, what the new draft. No, shouting, screaming. This went on for 3-4 times. Then I said, sir, now I should tell you what I am reading. This is the industrial policy resolution of the Congress government of Maharashtra. You see, when the Congress government in Maharashtra proposed these changes, the BJP and Shiv Sena brought Maharashtra to a halt. Now, at your asking, I am reading all this and you are bringing parliament to a halt. मगर यही होता है. मैं आपको बतलाता हूँ, if they don't mind my betraying a confidence, 2 of the senior most leaders of the Congress during this disinvestment time, they said to me, one of them said, they were both standing in the lobby, they said, this reform is a very lonely process. In this privatization business, only you can do it. So you must continue to do it. Our people will shout, but don't worry, you do this. But their people kept shouting so much. और अगर आप नाम पूछोगे तो बड़ी मुश्किल होगी. अच्छा, तो they kept shouting so much that when they came to office, they could not do what is necessary to be done, which was a continuation of what they had begun. And now, in desperation, they are selling minority shares. So this idea of yours, of shouting without examination, that our job as an opposition, whoever is in opposition, is just to oppose, is a very short-sighted policy. It can only result in harming the country.
And just to follow on, the other set of people who also make it very difficult for government to work are judges. You've already spoken about 1,400-page judgment and so on, but now they believe they have a view on everything, including policy matters. How do you solve that challenge?
No, first, as I mentioned to you, by a dialogue. Second is that actually speaking, we just cannot have a situation. The judges are becoming more assertive because the government is not there. They appear as giants because we are on our knees. It's Karl Marx. That's the case. Otherwise, I'll tell you, I can give you a frank thing, that in the judgment of the Supreme Court on the telecom matter, there was just a paragraph which is an obiter dicta. It was not the issue before them. The policy was not the issue before them. But they just said all natural resources should be auctioned. You want to auction uranium? All scarce natural resources. Drinking water in India is scarce. Ask Gurcharan, should that be auctioned in urban areas? Magar, the moving finger writes, and having writ moves on. But why did the government why was it not able to argue its case well and oppose it in public? Because in its own eyes, it has so little legitimacy. That is why the judges have become so assertive.